female athletes, so whether you play soccer, basketball, volleyball, you run track, or anything in between, staying healthy and injury-free is a huge part of enjoying the sport that you love. So today we'll be talking about helpful tips like how to train safely, build strength, fuel your body, and give yourself enough time to rest so you can stay at your best. So the goal is to help you play hard and avoid injuries that might slow you down. And here's a huge thank you to our two amazing panelists, Coach Carlos and Ms. Francis, for taking time out of their busy day to share their knowledge with us. So we're very grateful you're here to teach us these important tools. All right, so with that, let's get started. So Mr. Joshua Carlos is a senior lecturer in the Biological Sciences Department at USC, teaching labs in anatomy, applied physiology, motor control and learning, sports science, and nutrition. He holds a master's in exercise physiology from Cal State Northridge and is an ACE certified personal trainer and group fitness instructor. He's also a sports performance and youth fitness specialist. So he's been coaching athletes since 2008 and has been running for 28 years. So welcome, Coach Carlos.
How's everybody doing?
Good.
Good. All right. Well, I got a little PowerPoint presentation to share with you all. But first, I would like to take a little poll to kind of see where we're all at. So first up, raise your hand if you think weightlifting is primarily for the boys. Beautiful. That's what I like to see. Raise your hand if you've ever weightlifted before. Even better. And raise your hand if you think weightlifting will make you bulky. That's okay, I like the honesty, all right? Good. Okay, so overall we're kind of on the same page here, right? We know that weightlifting is not just for the boys. We should be weightlifting no matter who we are. If you're a person, you should be doing some type of weightlifting. And then finally, weightlifting will not make you bulky, specifically from a female perspective. And we're going to talk about just why that is, okay? So, this question that was proposed to me, why do females get injured more? Well, we know that you all are about 2 to 6 times more likely to sustain some type of injury compared to your male counterparts, right? That's something that we see time and again. But why is that? Unfortunately, there is no general consensus as to one single item or one single thing as to why this happens, but we know that there's a few things that contributes to this. One of the first things is variations in ligament laxity. What is laxity? Essentially, ligaments and tendons have a tendency to be flexible. The greater the laxity, the greater the flexibility. On average, females have greater ligament laxity than do males. On top of that, across the board, you all within yourselves, all females, have differences in this laxity. So some of you are actually a little bit more prone to injuries than others. And you're probably thinking, oh, that's definitely me. I've got this injury, I got that injury. I heard somebody that sprained their ankle, the other day, right? Some of that could be attributed to some of this ligament laxity. Then we have different anatomical characteristics. At the foundation, male and female anatomy is the same in the sense that we have the same bones, we have the same muscles. But how these muscles and bones look inside each of us are very different. Then we have differences in hormone levels. We're pretty familiar that males have a lot of testosterone, females have a lot of estrogen and progesterone. That is going to contribute to some of this, and we're going to go a little bit more in depth in just a moment. And then we've got greater muscular imbalances. On average, females tend to be a lot more quad dominant, a lot weaker in that posterior chain of musculature, glute, hamstrings, calves. And then the big one, differences in training and coaching. Differences in training across sports, and then the coaches that are actually doing all of this, the training for you all. And so with that, because even though we have all of these reasons as to why there may be increased risk for you all being injured, that doesn't mean that we throw in the towel and say, well, I'm a female, I'm going to get injured more, and there's nothing I can do about it. Absolutely, there's something that we can do. Going down the list here, variations in ligament laxity, flexibility in the joints. We don't really want too much flexibility in the joint, and how we mitigate that is through strength training. If we can strengthen the muscles surrounding those joints, we provide stability, and that is going to promote greater injury prevention. Then for different anatomical characteristics, if we don't like our anatomy, well, we didn't pick our parents right. I say that jokingly because we have no choice in the matter, but there's something that we can do, and again, that is strength training. Then we have programming. So we know that with you all go through your menstrual cycles. We've got different expressions of the different hormones of estrogen and progesterone. So we know that there's going to be differences in your performances, and how we program your training when we prescribe certain modalities of training can be greatly influenced by this. And so we want to do this accordingly. And then greater muscular imbalances. Surprise, surprise, another bullet point there, strength training. So we can kind of see that there's a pattern here and the efficacy of strength training. And then finally, differences in training and coaching. A lot of this has to do with the athlete-coach relationship. How open are you with your coach in telling them about the things that you're experiencing? And then how, on the flip side, how receptive is your coach to getting all this information, utilizing it, and programming accordingly? So we're going to go through a little bit more in depth about these differences, in anatomical differences between males and females. And so starting with our males, the biggest thing here is that we know on average they have a larger lung capacity, they have a larger heart size, and they've got greater lean body mass. Ultimately, this translates to they're typically better in aerobic events, not always. With that larger lung capacity and larger heart size, and they're typically stronger because they have more lean body mass. Females. You all typically, generally, on average, have a lower center of gravity. So a lot of that is attributed to you hold more of your weight in your hips. A lot of that has to do with getting your bodies ready for childbearing. And so with that, that doesn't mean it's necessarily bad. The lower our center of gravity is, the lower it is to the ground, the more stability that we have. But with that, because you all hold a little bit more weight in the hips, it's a little bit more work for you when we do lower body movement. So things like jumping, sprinting, things where we have to get the lower body in motion, it's a little bit harder for you. Doesn't mean it's impossible, because again, we can do things to mitigate that. A lot of that starts with strength training. And then there's this, the second bullet point. You're at a greater predisposition for kyphotic postures. Kyphotic postures means your shoulders start to round over, forward head lean tilt, and a lot of this begins with breast development. But with that, with early on acknowledging of all of this, we can get into some proper strength training. You should be doing strength training earlier on in your life. You can do it as young as 10, 11, 12 years old, even pre-puberty. We're not putting plates and plates on your back and doing heavy squatting, but we're doing body weight banded work, things to at least strengthen that posterior chain of musculature to keep you upright, so that it's not something that is going to be impeding your performance. Going on with other anatomical sex differences. So with our male characteristics, one of the biggest things is they typically have a narrower pelvis. We've got a smaller Q angle. The Q angle is effectively where your big femur bone, your big leg bone meets your hip. And so we can see here where the pelvis is and where the femur is, that's that angle. So we're looking at this. For a male, it typically looks pretty straight, right? It's a very small Q angle. The other thing, we talked about levels of testosterone. Testosterone builds greater lean body mass. This is why when males do all the strength training, they tend to bulk up, right? Part of that is because of the release of testosterone. Females, on the other hand, you all generally have a wider pelvis. I talked about being able to support childbearing. You also have a larger Q angle. And we can see from the knee to the hip, that angle at which that knee and is relation to the hip is a lot more narrow, a lot steeper. And so with that, that is going to promote a greater predisposition to knee valgus, meaning your knees start to cave in, right? And when the knees start to cave in, your arches start to collapse, the toes start to flare out, and then with that, that is going to effectively push your femur back into your hip, and then we get this anterior pelvic tilt. This does not mean that you have a big butt. This is what we call a fake butt, right? You walk around like this, like, oh yeah, I'm thick, I'm good, I'm with it, but this is not something that we want. We want to have a strong pelvis, we want a neutral tilt, and we want to grow our butts the right way, right? So we're doing a lot of glute work, we're doing hamstring work. That's how you build a functional, strong butt, as opposed to this kind of artificial one where we're sticking, we've got this lordosis, curvature in our low back, we're kind of upright here, and we're walking around like this, right? We don't want to walk around like this, we want to keep it tight, close in. And then with that, we've got higher levels of estrogen and progesterone. That doesn't mean it's a bad thing, but it's something that is actually going to benefit us in some of our training, okay? So now, A good portion of this, we're going to talk a lot about your menstrual cycle, and part of that is because we want to make sure that we're doing things right when we're training you, when we're programming your training. First thing I do want to talk about is the first few days of your menstrual cycle. This is the menstruation part, early follicular phase, where we're losing our blood, right? You're on your periods, and on average, within an entire cycle, you're going to lose about 15 to 30 milligrams of iron. How that's translated is, we know the recommended daily allowance, that RDA, you should be consuming about 15 milligrams per day. Now, how you're consuming this can be in red meats, this can be in poultry, this can be in fish, leafy greens, or an iron supplement. Now, let's say we're not having a great diet, right? We're eating all the sugary foods, we're eating our chips, we're skimping out on some of our protein, we're not having our leafy greens. Chances are you're not getting this RDA of 15, you're getting less than that, and so that means every cycle that we're going through, we're losing 15 to 30 milligrams. 15 if you're a lighter bleeder, 30 if you're a little bit heavier with your bleeding. And so what this translates then into, if you're a light bleeder and you're not supplementing correctly, you're not eating right, within a full year, by the end of that year, you are at a greater risk for anemia. If you're a heavier bleeder, now you've sliced that in half. So within 6 months, you put yourself at a greater risk for developing anemia. This is not something that's irreversible. We can absolutely reverse this. But what this means is that anemia is a deficiency in iron. And what iron helps us do is hold on to oxygen. And what oxygen helps us do is to recover. Every part of the recovery process is aerobic, and we need this oxygen delivery to promote some of this recovery. So if we don't supplement with the iron, if we're not getting that iron consumption, we can lose out on some of our performance. Now let's talk about estrogen. What does estrogen do for us? It boosts strength, not muscle, strength. If we look at when estrogen in this cycle is the highest, it's closest to ovulation, so about 10 to 14 days, this is where you all are actually your strongest. So if you've got a younger brother, an older brother, and they're pissing you off and you want to pick a fight, this is the time to do it, because you're going to be very strong at this time in your cycle, okay? So estrogen actually boosts their strength pretty substantially. The other thing that estrogen does, it promotes faster recovery. So if we translate this into a training regimen, this is the time where we're doing some high intensity thing. If we're in the weight room, we're lifting a little bit heavier, because you're going to be stronger and you're going to recover a lot faster when we engage in these activities. Now the trade-off with estrogen, it blunts development of muscle growth. Pros and cons to this. Pros, if you don't want to bulk, you're not going to because of estrogen. Estrogen blocks a pathway, an IGF pathway that testosterone promotes to enable you to build muscle. Estrogen blunts this pathway. You're still going to build muscle, but you're not going to look like Arnold Schwarzenegger or Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson by lifting. Then we have progesterone. Progesterone is a catabolic hormone. It breaks things down. Progesterone primarily breaks down protein, and so with that, we know protein is a foundation of skeletal muscle, and so at this time, we need to be supplementing with a lot of good hearty proteins. But the trade-off is that progesterone is also endurance boosting. So again, if we look at this cycle, over here, we've got high estrogen, low progesterone. We're probably going to be doing high intensity, heavy weight lifting. We're going to recover a lot faster from this. But then we go further on outside of your, towards the latter phase of your menstrual cycle. We see estrogen starts to drop. We're going to lose some of our strength. We're not going to recover as quickly. And then we have high progesterone over here, where it's a catabolic hormone, where things are breaking down. You're at a greater risk for injury in this phase of your cycle. So maybe we're doing, but we boost endurance, so maybe we're doing longer distance training, lower intensity, longer duration. Then we have this performance variation overall. So we can see how throughout your entire cycle, we should not be training the same way that the boys are, right? And part of that is identifying these constraints and being able to adapt with it. And so this kind of goes back to that relationship, talking with your coach. Now, I know that some females, it's not unheard of that if you're all in the same sport, you're all doing the same things, your cycles start to sync. That's great for us coaches, because then we've got kind of one program, but that's not always the case. And so having these conversations with your coach, letting them know, I'm at this part, I'm feeling this way, they should be able to accommodate accordingly, or they should be accommodating accordingly. Now, how does nutrition play a role in all of this? Well, If we've got low estrogen, we know that when we are lower in estrogen, we're going to have greater utilization of carbohydrates. Your body has two main sources of fuel, carbohydrates and fats. During low estrogen phases, your body preferentiates to use carbohydrates over fats. Now, what does that mean? It's going to be easier for you to perform high-intensity exercise, because high-intensity exercise, we like using carbs. Carbs are a very fast way to generate energy. But if we look at this over here, the only time that we have really low estrogen is in this phase of menstruation, where we know we would not be doing high-intensity work here. Why is that? Well, you all know what you experience during your periods, right? You're feeling cramps, you're feeling sorenesses, you're feeling fatigue, you're feeling cranky, right? So not a good time to be doing stuff like that, even though we're utilizing carbohydrates heavily. And so with that, we want to go into this high estrogen where we have greater fat utilization, and it's harder to perform these prolonged high-intensity exercises. But I told you earlier, during this phase, that high estrogen, we should be doing high-intensity and heavy weightlifting. So what does that mean for you all? During this time, you got to make sure that you're getting in your good, hearty carbohydrates. That means you're ingesting your whole grains. It means you're ingesting, you're getting some good rice, brown rice, quinoa, oatmeal, things like that, where you're supplementing so that while you're feeling your strongest, you're getting the carbohydrates to support them, right? What about high progesterone? We know with high progesterone, we talked about it's a catabolic hormone, greater protein breakdown. So what does that mean for you all? Well, to mitigate that, we need greater protein supplementation. Now, going through all of this, right, we see these nutritional guidelines. That does not mean that, okay, I need to eat this way in the first week, I need to eat this way in the next week, and then I need to eat this way in the third week. No. What this means is that we have to have overall, throughout the entire month, a very well-rounded diet. And then if you want to really take your performance to the next level, then we address that. So maybe during this part of your cycle, we consume a little bit more carbohydrates, just slightly more than what we're used to. And this phase, we eat a little bit more protein, slightly more than we're used to. But it's not that we've got 3 different diet plans for an entire month. It should be one good, well-rounded diet where you're eating the right things, you're drinking your water, you're doing everything that you need to sustain your performance. Now talking about hydration. So hydration, we're going to couple it up into low hormone versus high hormone. So low hormone is going to be that early phase, high hormone is going to be the latter phase, and then in between is just going to be kind of a mixture. And so during this low hormone phase, the first early few days of your menstruation, you're going to have greater plasma volume. What this will translate to, if you've got greater plasma volume, it's easier to do some of that aerobic work, but it's also going to improve your heat tolerance. We have the ability to sweat and then allow it to thermoregulate. Now, if we start edging outside of this and going into this high hormone, you're going to have thicker blood. Part of that, if we think about that low hormone, during that time, we were menstruating. We're losing a lot of blood. We're also losing a lot of that water. And so that's going to make your blood more viscous. It's going to be thicker. It's not going to move as easily. So what does that mean for you all? You have to make sure that you are hydrating adequately. Always, always, always have water on you, drinking it, drinking it, drinking it. Then with that, in addition to the thicker blood, you're also going to have greater sodium loss. And if you're consuming all this excess water and you've got greater sodium loss, you're sweating more with that salt, that puts you at risk for what's called hyponatremia. That means you're at an imbalance. You are not salty enough. Not mean salty, but like you don't have enough salt in you, or so we need to supplement that. And how do we do that? Again, going back to that diet. Are we getting adequate sodium in our diet? Do we need to take an electrolyte tablet, like a Noon tablet or a liquid IV or something like that? You can don't get the sugary stuff like Gatorade, get something a little bit more substantive, but something to mitigate that. And so with that, because we have low plasma volume, we've got this greater sodium loss overall, and even progesterone and estrogen are going to elevate your core temperature. That reduces your heat tolerance, and it also creates a higher sweating threshold. So it's going to take a lot more for you to start sweating, which is not necessarily good because sweating is our main mechanism of thermoregulating. And if we don't do that, that puts you at greater risk for heat-related illnesses like heat stroke or other things that are going to cause some dysfunction. Now, how does this translate between training male athletes versus training female athletes? Well, training male athletes, they've got two major pros. They can pack on muscle a lot easier. That means they can get stronger a little bit faster. That means they're a little bit more stable. They're less prone to injuries. And overall, they've got greater upper body strength on average. But what are their cons? We've got a laundry list. Males tend to get more sore than women. Comes with the playing field, right? They gain more muscle, they've got more muscle, that's more muscle damage that they're going to incur. That means they're going to feel a lot more sore than you are. And what does that translate to? They need more rest. They need more rest in between heavy training sessions. They need more rest even between their sets. Overall, they're also going to require less training volume. Did you all know that you all can actually handle a much higher training load, training volume than your male counterparts? Part of that, again, is that estrogen. It promotes recovery. And then they have also a diminished work capacity once they are fatigued. Once they hit that point where they've fatigued, for us to ask them to do more at the same level is a lot harder for them to do physiologically than it is for females. So overall, men aren't the play. Training them, it's not always fun. They come with a lot of baggage. But what about the females? Believe it or not, you have a lot more pros. Why is that? Well, one, you can handle work closer to your 1 rep max. So in the weight room, when we're doing heavy weightlifting, squat, deadlift, bench press, things of that nature, right? We want to assess your 1 rep max. How much weight can you push or pull or anything like that one time? During training, outside of that 1 rep max assessment, you all have a much greater capacity to work at that high level, talking 90, 92, 95%. More frequently than your male counterparts. That's good for you. You can also tolerate, on average, 1.25 times more training load. So what does that mean? You can do more reps, you can do more sessions, you can do more sets. Overall, you can train a lot longer and a lot harder than your male counterparts. That is good from a performance standpoint. And when you do become fatigued, you can also sustain the effort and sustain the actual quality of those efforts for a lot longer and a lot better. Can handle eccentric work more. Eccentric work are negatives. So we know that muscles contract 3 ways. Isometric, there's no change in the length. Eccentric means the muscles lengthen while keeping tension. Concentric is the shortening. So when we do a squat, coming up and out of the squat is that concentric. Eccentric is slowly lowering yourself down, right? Doing this eccentric work is great from a performance standpoint because that's where injuries mostly happen, is in that eccentric phase and that eccentric loading. So when we jump, when do you think most people get injured? Jumping up or coming down? Coming down, absolutely, right? That's the eccentric loading. So we do a lot of eccentric work with you all in the weight room, or at least we should be, and you can handle that a lot better. You also get less sore. Just because you've got less muscles doesn't mean overall you're going to be weaker than your male counterparts, but you can still be strong, and with less muscle mass, you're not going to get as sore. You're going to recover faster. I keep repeating that from relative to estrogen, and you need less rest between sets. Now, the major cons. Upper body strength is typically not as robust for females. That means doing body weight upper body exercises is a lot harder for you. How many of you all can do a push-up? How many of you all can do a chin-up or a pull-up? A lot less, right? But does that mean you can never do it? Absolutely not. That is a trainable thing that we can do. So that's the good news, right? So one of your cons, we can train. The cons of the males isn't necessarily trainable, right? That's just they're restricted a little bit by their physiology. And then the one thing that isn't necessarily trainable, you have a period in your menstrual cycle where you're at greater risk of injury. That is something that we can work around, right? What we're programming for during that part of your cycle and how we program the things that we're doing, that is something that we can fix to make sure that you don't get injured, to make sure that you have the best season of possible. And so kind of circling back, you have all of these things where strength training is a huge part of this, right? And there's that coach and athlete relationship that your coach has a responsibility, but also you as athletes have a responsibility in understanding your sport and understanding yourselves. But the biggest thing outside of that is, are you all keeping up with your nutrition? Are you keeping up with your hydration? And the most important thing, are you getting enough hours of sleep? Because you can eat all the right things, you can do all the right things in the weight room for your sport, hydrate well, but if you are not giving your body that time to rest and recover, then all of that kind of becomes moot. At some point, there's only so much that you can do to outperform or outdo lack of sleep. And so with all of this, my biggest thing is you got to get comfortable with being in the weight room. You got to be comfortable with talking with your coaches, and then you yourself, where do you want to be in your sport? Do you want to be at that next level? You're going to have to do a couple more things and tracking yourselves and tracking your cycles and tracking your nutrition so that you can get to that next level.